Today's episode is brought to you by Mazars.
SoundCartel.
From SoundCartel, I'm Nicole Goodman, and this is Business Essentials Daily. The downturn in the economy continues to hurt many businesses right now, so if costs are tight, you need to work out where you can trim the fat. Brad Kasell says it comes down to your ability to analyse data. Brad is APAC Principal Technology Strategist at Domo, and he begins by explaining to Chris Ashmore that when times are good, businesses can fall into the trap of spending more than they should.
Your business is performing well. Typically, you get a lot of fat, makes it sound bad, but you get a lot of inefficiencies that kind of creep in because if you're achieving your goals and hitting your numbers and everything's going great, there's really no incentive to really scrutinize every penny. And so I think what happens is once business does take a bit of a downturn and people say, well, how can we reduce costs? Just by looking at it in the first case, that you can get an immediate improvement just by paying attention to where things might have slipped before and so forth. I think where a lot of companies focus is just trying to do things quicker. So let's say, for example, if I have accounts receivable and I'm sitting on accounts receivable for 30, 60, 90 days, can I bring those in? Is there something I can do within my business to process my payments more quickly? So it's not so much just doing anything new necessarily, but just doing them a bit tighter, just kind of sit up a bit straighter in your chair, pay a bit more attention and get things done. That's never a bad thing. And the result as well is that you can oftentimes save some money just by paying attention.
Is there a way to get the staff involved?
That's a really good question because oftentimes in tough times, it feels like the pressure is flowing downhill, right? Okay, times are tough. We've all got to tighten our belts. Everyone's got to work harder. And it falls to the frontline staff to try and magically solve the problem. I think what I've noticed with the, let's call it some more enlightened companies, is oftentimes, again, it's a communication issue or a communication technique where the leaders come to the business and ask for ideas. We were doing a lot of work with finance teams recently. And the thing that was interesting was the first case was work harder, process the month-end close faster, scrutinize the numbers. I want numbers updated every day. But where it actually became, like I said, more enlightened was, okay, finance team, bring me ideas. We're trying to save money. You guys know our business better than anyone financially. I don't want to see standard operational reports or month-end close. That's just hygiene. What I want you to do is bring me some ideas, bring ideas to sales, bring ideas to marketing, because you've got a unique perspective on how money flows through our business. And honestly, the finance people, if you ask them to do that, one, they're flattered because people don't normally ask them to do that. And it's amazing how creative they are. They can see things that others cannot. And so I think, the way to do it is, it sounds kind of corny, is just ask for their ideas and their input. And oftentimes you get some really surprising answers.
There is so much for leaders across industries to manage today, so don't feel like you're alone. There's a great resource actually called Leading Conversations. It's a podcast from leading teams, and it shines a light on the kinds of issues that impact performance, eat away at culture, and how they helped to turn things around. There's 3 full seasons of Leading Conversations available, so start listening at leadingteams.net.au/podcast, or it's free wherever you listen to podcasts.
When it comes to analytics, Brad, how can a business use it to keep its head above water during a recession, say?
I think what happens, especially in a recession, and that notion of keeping your head above water is around using data and using analytics to figure out what metrics are important and which ones are not. Because oftentimes, let's call them vanity metrics, where you might be tracking some numbers that make you feel good about yourself, or, they present the business in a positive light, but they're maybe not material to the survival of the business. So I think what analytics is really good about, and it talks to that objectivity we spoke about before, is being able to prioritize which aspects of your business are the most sensitive and the most risky and the most vulnerable So, if, for example, you're suddenly finding that your accounts receivable are blowing out or your cash flow is at a risk, that's the type of thing that's going to put you out of business. Whereas something like market share or your marketing spend or customer churn, they're really important too, but they're not life-threatening. So I think, having analytics and being able to objectively compare, the impacts. Some data might change just 1 or 2%, might go up or down slightly over the course of a recession, whereas others can just swing wildly all over the place. And you need to get a handle on what your business is sensitive to and what it's not.
It's important then, I suppose, that businesses need to closely monitor everything on a regular basis and not just set and forget, but do it all the time.
Absolutely. I think, the biggest mistake a business can do is to say, we've done it. We're done. We've got our reporting in place. We've got all the systems in place. And now we just run with it. Because the classic example was around something like COVID. No one was predicting COVID. And then suddenly, boom, in the space of weeks, if not days, people had to completely transform their business. And if you don't have a baseline level of data or information about the way your business runs, it's really hard to do that. It's really hard to pivot if you don't even know what you've got to work with. So I think, it's incumbent upon all business owners to, and I understand where this kind of question kind of comes from, because on one hand, it feels overwhelming. I've got to keep track of everything all the time. And I think you need to be practical about that. You can't just immerse yourself in all of this stuff. You actually have to run your business at some point. But on the other hand, I do like your point around it's not set and forget. You have to adapt to, even COVID's an extreme example, but you've got seasonality, you've got things, political changes, you've got all kinds of things that are happening around you, just customer preferences and tastes that you need to be aware of. If we use electric vehicles as an example, if you look at, say, for example, a company like Toyota has been very slow to get onto electric vehicles. The next thing you know, if they sit on that too long, they've missed the boat and they're in real trouble. I mean, that's at the top end of town. But the same thing can happen, at any level of business, where if you're not adapting continuously, you could easily get left behind.
That was Brad Kasell, APAC Principal Technology Strategist at Domo. Business Essentials Daily is a SoundCartel podcast. Producers are Nick Schildberger, Chris Ashmore, Jeff Waters and myself. Technical production by Pete Letts. I'm Nicole Goodman. Thanks for listening. We'll bring you more Be Daily next week. SoundCartel. This episode was brought to you by Mazars. To find out more, visit mazars.com.au. That's mazars.com.au.